The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has issued a staggering official statement revealing that Iran has launched a colossal total of approximately 4,300 weapon systems, including 700 ballistic missiles and 3,600 suicide drones (UAVs), targeting US and Israeli strategic assets since the first shots of the conflict were fired, while Tehran has remained tight-lipped regarding the specific military damage inflicted on their own side. Their domestic state-run news agencies have released harrowing figures. They claim that over 54,000 civilian structures across Iran have been decimated or severely damaged following the coalition's retaliatory strikes. Among these ruins are hundreds of critical medical facilities, and the reports confirm a tragic loss of life among healthcare workers who were caught in the crossfire of this high-intensity aerial campaign. On the opposing side of the battlefield, the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, have signaled that they have absolutely no intention of de-escalating. In a single 24-hour window, Israel declared it had successfully neutralized over 200 new high-priority targets, concentrated primarily in central and western Iran. These strikes were designed with surgical precision to dismantle command and control centers, advanced air defense batteries, and clandestine weapons manufacturing plants. IDF spokesperson General Efi Defrin delivered a weightier warning, asserting that the Israeli military maintains a target bank containing thousands of additional Iranian sites and is continuously identifying new vulnerabilities every single day. The reach of the conflict has even touched the doorsteps of the American diplomatic corps in Israel, where debris from intercepted Iranian missiles has rained down on residential compounds, though fortunately no casualties were reported in those specific incidents. However, veteran military observers are now surfacing a deeply unsettling hypothesis. Is the coalition being lured into a massive attrition trap? Many analysts suggest that Iran's recent high-profile barrages may have intentionally utilized aging legacy generations of ballistic missiles. The cold logic behind this tactic is to overstretch and saturate the sophisticated air defense umbrellas of the US and Israel, forcing the adversaries to expend multi-million-dollar interceptor missiles against relatively inexpensive, low-tech targets. Classified briefings within the US Congress have reportedly revealed a critical intelligence assessment. Iran may still be hoarding up to 50% of its most modern missile inventory and mobile launchers deep within hardened subterranean silos, ready to be unleashed the moment a definitive gap appears in the enemy's defensive posture. On the maritime front, the atmosphere at the Strait of Hormuz has reached a fever pitch of hostility. Representatives of the IRGC have publicly and vocally challenged President Donald Trump's claims that the Iranian Navy has been neutralized. General Ali Mohammed Naini went as far as to issue a direct taunt, suggesting that if Trump truly believes in his declared victory, he should attempt to sail a fleet of US warships through the Persian Gulf without incident. At this moment, this vital maritime artery is in a state of total paralysis, with commercial shipping traffic plummeting by a disastrous 90%. At least 20 vessels have been attacked or seized, resulting in 20% of the world's daily crude oil supply being held hostage, a development that is sending unpredictable and violent shocks through the global economic system. In the face of this escalating maritime crisis, President Trump is frantically attempting to assemble an international coalition to forcibly reopen the Strait of Hormuz, specifically calling for assistance in mine clearing and counter-swarm operations. He has reached out to at least 7 key nations, emphasizing that the deafening silence of America's allies could threaten the very future and relevance of the NATO alliance. However, the response from traditionally close partners has been lukewarm at best, revealing a profound and dangerous schism in the global strategy for dealing with the Iranian threat. Japan, speaking through Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, has indicated that Tokyo currently has no plans to deploy naval assets to the region, stating that they are only exploring what can be done within the strict constraints of their pacifist legal framework. Similarly, Australia has flatly declined the request to send warships to the strait, despite acknowledging the critical importance of the waterway to international trade. In South Korea, the government has adopted an extremely cautious stance, asserting that any decision to deploy troops or assets abroad requires a formal approval from a National Assembly that is currently dominated by a skeptical opposition party. Even the European powers have shown a marked lack of enthusiasm for the American-led effort. While UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has discussed the urgency of reopening shipping lanes with Trump, there has been no concrete military commitment from London. Germany has expressed even greater skepticism, with officials suggesting that the current military campaign has yet to prove its effectiveness. Therefore, expanding the scope of operations to the Hormuz Strait is unlikely to improve regional security and might instead trigger a wider conflagration. It appears that while the US and Israel are determined to deliver a decisive blow to Iran, their closest allies are terrified of being dragged into a quagmire where the economic and political costs are simply too high to bear. We have reached a critical juncture where even Washington's most loyal allies are starting to question the end state of the campaign in Iran. The reality is that President Donald Trump's constantly shifting explanations for launching this war have left the international community in a state of profound confusion. In recent high-level calls with G7 leaders, Trump was reportedly pressed by his European counterparts to clarify his ultimate strategic objective. Rather than providing a clear and concise roadmap, the American leader simply asserted that he has many goals in mind and desires a swift conclusion, a diplomatic answer that is dangerously shrouded in ambiguity. This lack of clarity has led to an inevitable consequence. Not a single nation is currently willing to answer Washington's call to mobilize resources for the clearing of the Strait of Hormuz. European and Gulf allies are displaying an extreme reluctance to commit to a war that has no clearly defined exit strategy. Meanwhile, despite Trump's repeated declarations of victory, the reality on the ground tells a different story. Iran continues to launch daily salvos of missiles and drones at targets across the Middle East. This proves that while US military superiority has undoubtedly crippled much of Iran's infrastructure, it has yet to extinguish Tehran's will to resist or its capacity to strike back. The economic burden of the war is now manifesting as a direct political pressure on the Republican Party as the midterm elections loom. Iran's blockade of the Strait of Hormuz has driven global oil benchmarks past the $100 per barrel mark, and in the United States, gasoline prices have surged by approximately 65 cents per gallon since the hostilities began. The International Energy Agency, IEA, has gone as far as to warn that this could represent the largest supply disruption in history. Consequently, even Trump's most trusted advisors are reportedly urging him to declare a victory soon and wind down the conflict before voter confidence and the stability of the national economy collapse entirely. However, ending the war is proving to be anything but simple, as the US and Iran are measuring victory by entirely different metrics. For Washington, victory is defined by the total destruction of the adversary's military capabilities and nuclear aspirations. But for Tehran, merely surviving the onslaught of a superpower is considered a resounding strategic success. Expert Vali Nasser from Johns Hopkins University notes that while Trump may have hoped for a lightning war, the situation has spiraled out of control, becoming longer, messier, and far more expensive than any of the initial projections suggested. Currently, while nations like Oman and Saudi Arabia are working tirelessly through back-channel diplomatic avenues to de-escalate the tension, the demands coming from Tehran represent a massive hurdle. Iran is demanding that the United States pay full war reparations and provide a formal guarantee of non-aggression in the future, terms that the White House is almost certain to find unacceptable. Former British ambassador to Iran, Simon Gass, suggests that Tehran may believe they have secured a vital red line over the world's oil prices using relatively simple and inexpensive military means. As the theater of war shows signs of expanding into Lebanon and Iraq, the window for a diplomatic resolution is becoming narrower than ever. European officials perceive the latest US military escalation as a final, desperate push to hollow out Iran's remaining capabilities before Trump is forced by domestic pressure to withdraw. Ultimately, this war may not end with a signed treaty on a mahogany table, but rather when the president feels that the financial and political price tag has finally hit the absolute limit of America's endurance. President Donald Trump has stated that he is not yet ready to make a formal announcement regarding the conclusion of the war. Nevertheless, he maintains that Tehran's military has suffered catastrophic and irreversible losses. According to the White House's assessment, if the US military were to withdraw at this moment, it would take Iran at least a decade, if not longer, to reconstruct the infrastructure and capabilities they have lost in the past few weeks. Trump has emphasized that the recent waves of bombardment have nearly liquidated Iran's air force and its integrated air defense network, leaving the nation essentially incapable of protecting its own sovereign airspace. Simultaneously, Tehran's vaunted missile and drone production capacities are believed to have been significantly degraded. In this context, the US president has reaffirmed that Washington and Tel Aviv share identical strategic goals, while praising the seamless and rhythm-like coordination between the two militaries throughout the duration of the campaign. However, a new and dangerous turning point is emerging on the battlefield as Iran shifts its defensive and offensive tactics. Previously, US and Israeli strikes were largely focused on military hardware and personnel, though they occasionally impacted civilian and financial sectors to apply economic pressure. Now, Tehran has publicly adopted a fierce and uncompromising tit-for-tat posture. The Iranian leadership has vowed to respond in kind or with even greater force if their non-military or critical civilian infrastructure is targeted moving forward. This escalation suggests that the most destructive chapters of this conflict may still be yet to come.